welcome Dean, Managing Director of OKA. So quite a few people will know what OKA is, but for those that don't, what actually is an OKA?
Yeah, good evening to everyone, and thanks, Robert. So an OKA is a Australian design and built four-wheel drive light truck, and it was originally conceived in the late 80s. There was a prototype built, and initially it was something designed for use in the mining industry because it was a nice, tough, rugged platform to work off that could take up to 3 tonne. That was very attractive, and it's still a hole in the market that is needs to be filled by something. There are vehicles out there doing it, but there wasn't any at the time. So that was developed. The OKA factory started production in 1992. They built 250 vehicles in the XT series,
right,
and then they built a further production run after going public for a year. They built a further 432 vehicles, all up in the first 2 models.
All right, cool.
So the LT was the second model.
Yeah. All right. So for those that have joined, you can ask questions using the Q&A function. And for those on Facebook, you can jump onto the Zoom meeting and ask questions directly then. So, so the reason I wanted to talk to you is because people can now place an order for a brand new OKA, can't they?
Absolutely. We're producing the third model, which is the NT series. The NT series has got a lot in common with the first 2 models. It's taken all the best components and thrown away the bits that weren't so good. It's got much more power.
Okay. So, on the power front, one of the questions which was pretty frequently asked was, does it still have the Perkins engine? And I heard one user describe it as an OKA will go anywhere with a Perkins engine, just unloaded.
Yeah, look, the Perkins engine will take it a lot of places off-road.
Yeah.
It's just doesn't, the on-road capability is not that good. Headwinds and hills really kill it.
Mm-hmm.
Off-road, there is a little bit of a lack of power and torque, but it's sufficient to do the job, put it that way.
Are you talking about the old engine or the new engine?
Talking about the old engine.
Okay.
No,
what were the specs of the old engine?
The old engine was about 350 Newton meters of torque.
Okay, not much.
And it was 110 horsepower.
Okay.
And that was 4 litre. So in the NT series, we've gone to a Euro 3, then 4, then 5, which is what we're at now.
Yeah.
So they're all after treatment engines. So the latest engine is 700 Newton meters.
Yeah.
And it's 185 horsepower.
Okay, that's what, 130 watt kilowatts or so?
About that, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a 6-speed automatic, right?
6-speed Allison auto.
Yep.
And it's coupled to a purpose-built transfer case and diffs.
Okay, so the 2 main problems with OKAs was the lack of power and the transfer case, both of which are fixed in the current models.
Correct.
Okay.
You've nailed it there. You've absolutely nailed it.
All right, that's good, yeah. So from a recreational, so most of the people that follow me, recreational four-wheel drivers, and they're looking to go touring. And I guess if you're going to go touring, you're going to take a load. You've got quite a few options. You could take something like a Ranger. You could make something a bit of a heavier duty ute, like a single cab 79 series, or you could tow a camper trailer. You could tow a big trailer, or you could move up to, or create a 6-wheel drive vehicle. There's lots of different options there. So why would somebody want to choose an OKA for their recreational four-wheel drive touring vehicle?
Well, for all those vehicles you've mentioned, and that includes, the trucks that are in the same weight range, all of those vehicles need a lot of modifications to be able to do what an OKA does standard.
Yeah.
So if you want to carry the weight, you're looking at GVM upgrades that can only achieve 2/3 of what an OKA can carry out of the shop, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So weight overloading is such a huge thing these days, because people are getting active and out and about more and more. So the natural progression in the marketplace has been for people to do the GVM upgrades, to do the light truck, the canter, all of those things. They spend inordinate amounts of money on these upgrades just to achieve something that OKA is standard built for.
Yeah.
So if you've got a cab chassis, you can take nearly 3 tonne away with you and go wherever you like.
Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. And but how big is the OKA relative to, let's say, a LC79?
Well, wheelbase is a big thing that affects your ability as a four-wheel drive, and the wheelbase on a standard OKA is less than, say, a Ford Ranger or a Toyota Hilux. All of those come in a dual cab configuration, but because they're a longer wheelbase, that inhibits their four-wheel drive capability.
Yeah.
The OKA is 1.9 metres wide, and it's just on 5 and 5.2 long, depending on the configuration.
Yeah.
So it is well within the capability. A lot of people, the best way of dealing with that question is, would you take it shopping? And the answer is yes, you can.
Yeah.
You can park it in a standard car park, open the doors over the top of the other cars, and move quite freely with it.
Yeah, because when I looked at the specs, I was surprised to find it had a slightly shorter wheelbase than a Ranger, and the turning circle was the same as a Land Cruiser 79 series, give or take about 100 mil or so. So by the way, guys, on Facebook and on the Zoom call, if you've got any questions, type them up and we'll get them answered. And you're speaking to the Managing Director of OKA here, so any question you got about OKAs, he's going to know about it. So yeah, I noticed that the OKA wasn't all that big. Now, do you do versions of it that you can drive on a car license, or must you have a light rigid truck to drive it as the GVM exceeds 4.5 tonnes?
So the way the truck is built, it's if you buy a cab chassis, for instance, you're going to be well under the 4.5 tonne.
Yeah.
However, the vehicle would be capable of almost 7 tonne or 6.5 tonne. So it depends on what you do from there. You can get it relicensed, and you can drive it on a normal C-class license, but that inhibits what else you do with the truck. So the all-up weight of the truck to begin with, depending on the configuration, is a little bit heavier here and there than most other vehicles in its class. Okay. And due to the construction, it's got quite a heavy, rigid chassis. And
but you could get it re-rated to just under 4.5 tonnes if you wanted to, and then drive it on a car licence.
You can, yes.
Okay.
You can.
All right, so that's an option for many people to do that. You can drive it on a car licence then, and the advantage is that then it becomes in a completely different tax and regulations bracket to the over 4.5 tonne vehicles.
Yes, but with the footnote that it would limit what you could do with the vehicle as far as carrying.
Right, and then you take a massive payload hit, because whilst the vehicle might be capable of a 6 tonne GVM,
as 6.5 tonne,
6.5 tonne, right. You can't legally load it above 4.5 if it's been derated to 4.5.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's the eternal trade-off. Whether you're looking at a Hino, a canter, or whatever else, do you go just under 4.5 tonnes, or do you go over? But you basically got both options there. Yeah.
That's correct.
All right. Okay, so if someone's decided, okay, we've basically outgrown a Ranger, outgrown an LC79, I want to step up to a forward control light truck, why would they choose an OKA over a Hino or a canter?
Well, the Hino is, both these trucks, when they've been modified, are they're serious enough to be a contender, put it that way. There's been a lot of money and time spent by organisations designing, engineering and re-engineering the suspension and the undercart for those vehicles. The expense is obviously added to the initial cost. But what they still don't achieve is the articulation that is built into the suspension in the OKA.
Yep.
There are lots of anecdotal evidence that I have from people that have owned both, and both like vehicles have been modified, and they've owned an OKA as well, and they come back to OKA because of the fantastic suspension and the ability to cover rough ground that it delivers. So the reasons why that happens is because the suspension stations on those vehicles are not long enough apart. The springs aren't long enough, even with parabolics.
Yep.
The parabolics don't have the movement in them to give you the articulation you need. So the OKA's got just a set of spring packs that are mainly 10 mil. There's some 8 mil in there. Depending on the version of vehicle you get, those spring packs, you've got, you know, 12 on the front and 13 on the rear.
Yeah.
So that makes it look pretty chunky, but they work absolutely beautifully.
Okay, so what you're saying then is that the OKA suspension has got greater flex than, let's say, a Canter or Hino. And I also know that with the other light truck vehicles, I know that they're cheaper than the OKA, but to get to where the OKA is, you've got to do a couple of things. One, you've got to convert them to single wheels at the back, because you never want to run double wheels off-road, because you can get, well, we'll go into that another time, but you just don't. And secondly, then you've got to increase the tyre diameter up to 35, 37 inch tyres.
That's correct, yeah.
Then, but with the OKA, all of that's done for you. And for me personally, another big advantage would be the fact that the OKA can be optioned with front and rear differential locks, because the heavier a vehicle is, the less keen I am using momentum to get over an obstacle. So the fact it's got front and rear lockers is a big plus for me there as well.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we've got our first question here. Is a fuel cell OKA realistic? Well, if I was going to guess what the first question would be, I would not have picked that. But Christopher Lennis asked, is a fuel cell OKA realistic?
Yes, it is. It's something I'm working on in the background. So the configuration that we've worked out, so we're looking at a trial fuel cell for a display vehicle. Just the fuel cell alone will cost $50,000.
Yeah.
The other bits and pieces to make it work, you're probably looking at another $20,000. So with the trial vehicle, we're looking at using the same differential components, maintaining the suspension, and using pinion motors to power the vehicle. So it would be a fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell with battery power, with more battery power than perhaps what you'd need just to retain a pool of power.
Wow.
With some storage, so you could go for extended periods of time. So we're working on that in the background. It is realistic wherever you look. This is coming whether anyone wants it or not. Electric and hydrogen are going to be features in vehicles from this point on.
Well, they already are. I mean, all of the car manufacturers have said they're going to electrify their ranges, which means either electric or hybrid for every single one of their vehicles in the model line by about 2025, depending on which manufacturer, but by about then. So yeah, that's definitely coming. Yeah. Now, question about servicing. So one of the reasons people like to buy Toyotas, for example, is say, oh, if I break down wherever, there's always a Toyota dealer around the corner. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that line of thinking. I mean, there's something to it, but it's not as big deal as I thought. There's probably only one OKA base, but let's say someone had a problem with their OKA. I mean, you're in Western Australia, over in Queensland. Is an OKA made of sufficiently, I guess, standardised components that any truck mechanic could just get to work on it?
Well, currently I feed parts into the Australian and international componentry. I'm sending some parts to New Zealand tomorrow for some OKAs over there. So really, it's just a phone call away. As far as the components go, are they interchangeable with other stuff? Yes. Drive shafts, you can get bearings for drive shafts anywhere you like. Can you get them in the form that an OKA has them? These are 1550 size Spicer bearings. Yeah, you can. You're going to know where to get them, but you can get them locally. People around Australia don't have too much trouble getting stuff locally, but there's a story of a guy in the Simpson Desert who broke an axle on top of a sand dune, got his satellite phone out, and within 2 days he had a replacement axle on site and he drove off.
Okay.
So as far as parts go, it's not a mass market that we're supplying these things to, so it's easy enough to have a database and make sure that people know where they can get the components from and know what they need to get their truck serviced.
Okay, cool. Now I got another question. How is drive achieved to the rearmost axle on a 6x6 variant? Is there a 6x6 OKA?
We're building one at the moment.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, that's the question. How do you get drive to that rear axle?
So the transfer case is set up with a second output.
Yep.
And the output has a brake drum on it. So we've fixed that to the brake drum. On top of the second, on the first diff, there is a disconnector.
Yep.
So that's a pneumatic operation. It's got a dog clutch inside. That then finds its place, and that will provide drive to the shaft going to the rear. We can have it in two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive or six-wheel drive.
Yep.
And we can run the axle completely lazy using freewheeling hubs, and by disconnecting the bearing going over the top.
Oh, fantastic! So you get fuel efficiency there as well, and triple twin lock, cross axle differential locks in all three axles. So
there's 3 sets of lockers, and also there's the client's request was to put an 11-speed Road Ranger gearbox in there.
Okay.
So we've worked out that each wheel will have 1 revolution every 15 seconds when it's in low. So that's quite a... That's pretty low. Yeah. That's low, yeah. So you virtually get out and watch your vehicle climb a hill.
Which it would do if it's 6-wheel drive. I've been out in 6x6s. With lockers and all axles. I was going to say twin lock, but it's actually triple lock, and they're just amazing. You're going to have to send us photos or some video. That's going to be one incredible vehicle.
Yeah, well, we're just loading it up with 4 ton at the moment.
Yeah.
So start doing some tests on the cab chassis, and it's going to be a motorhome, so we're working on the module for that at the moment.
Have you got any photos of it you can share?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, well, you just share your screen on that. Well, I'm going to look at this question here. So Michael Howarth has said, what are the cost differences between running an OKA on a standard license versus over 4.5k GVM? Well, that's a pretty long answer there, because there's insurance, there's cost, there's registration, there's the cost of your light rigid license, and there's even sort of cost of toll roads and things like that as well. So it's quite a long answer. And I think also whether you can write it off in tax to a degree, you can do tax stuff as well. So there's quite a lot in that answer, and it really depends on your personal circumstances and the state you're in and everything else. Okay, so what's this? Oh, that's a 6-wheel drive.
There's the 6-wheel drive.
Now that is some flex on the back axle there. How are you achieving that sort of flex? Because so have you got a bogie system there? What does it look like?
So there's a central axle in the middle, and it rotates on like stub axles in the middle.
Yep.
It rotates on that backwards and forwards.
Yep.
And then we've got a set of parabolics off that, and then it goes to each axle, front and rear. So the axles have got tubes with threaded rod, which maintain the axles where they need to be in place, and yeah, the flex we get on it is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Part of the testing we're going to do is to see whether the springs are what they should be.
Yep.
We're not quite sure, because this thing will have a fantastic load carrying capacity, but it's going to be a motorhome. So whether we take some springs out or lighten them up and put more in is the next question. But it's quite a truck. It's got a 6BT Cummins in it, and it's one of our R series trucks, which is a remanufactured truck.
Okay, cool. Yeah, look, it's a great photo. Just pity about those three blokes staying in the way. To me, they really spoiled the shot. But it's fine. Now, next question. Just coming back to the previous topic from John Clark. How easy is the OKA to work on with the engine and gearbox? A local mechanic told me they had a lot of difficulty changing a gearbox access in the cab.
Changing the gearbox and the engine.
Well, it just says changing a gearbox access in the cab. Now, I think that means changing the gearbox and had difficulty accessing it with the cab, or getting the cab out of the way or something. I don't know.
Yeah, so the cab is fixed in position. A lot of people ask, can you put a tilt cab on it? So the cab itself is a ROPS cab. It's a full ROPS cab, so full rollover protection. And part of that rollover protection is the cab mounts. If you were to engineer something, you'd have to disconnect it from the rear modules, which would make it problematic. And you would lose some of that engineering, built-in engineering that you really want. So how difficult is it to pull transmissions out and engines out? Well, it's not that difficult. If you want to dip the oil, great place to start is opening the engine cover, dipping the oil, looking at your engine, doing whatever you need to do. You know, if you've got to change fan belts, same. If you want to top up your fluid levels, that's where you access all of that. If you want to change your engine, or indeed your transmission, we just, if we want to change the engine and transmission, for instance, we just put the vehicle on a stand, pull the front axle out, unbolt the engine, put our lifting gear through the cab, and drop the engine out. It's a 5-hour process, and the whole engine's out.
Yeah.
So if you want to rebuild an engine inside the truck, yeah, I don't think I'd like to be doing that all day.
No. Okay, all right. So that sounds relatively straightforward for a light truck then. But I mean, I guess these are bigger, heavier vehicles. So what you work on as a four-wheel drive is just going to be that step up, I guess. So.
Yeah. And, you know, everything's accessible. It's just a matter of, you know, the fact that the vehicle's got quite some ground clearance makes it easy enough to get under. Okay. It's not like you're have to jack up.
So, yeah, anyone can ask live questions, by the way, on the Zoom chat or on the Facebook Live. I'm looking at both so we can answer them. But a question here, what's the basic design philosophy behind an OKA? So if we look at, again, coming back to a light truck like a Fuso or the Hino, they are primarily utilitarian vehicles. They are designed for fleet buyers, professional users to do work. And, you know, they're mostly, I guess, on-road with some off-road capability. In fact, at one point, Fuso actually deleted the low range from the Canter, and you can kind of tell that because they come standard with the dual wheels at the back, but they can be made into capable off-roaders. What's the OKA design philosophy? Is it that same design sort of principle, that objective? Is it different?
So the OKA design philosophy was to build a rugged, all-terrain solution for, say, your extremes of all of that. So when you're running out of capability with your Isuzu or your Fuso, and you still want to carry a load, then that's where the OKA picks up.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, the OKA is better on road, it's better on rough roads, and it's better across rough country. So if you're, for instance, a geologist and you had a job to do getting samples out of a particular area where there's no roads, and you've got 2 ton of samples to get out of there. And OKA is the precise thing you want. All the other gear that drillers use is when they're doing exploration is big gear. The big Mercedes trucks that they use, set up with the drill rigs on them to get the sampling they want. But yeah, if you're a geologist, usually those guys have got Land Cruiser, and the Land Cruisers are hashed and bashed and dragged over sandhills and rocks and bits and pieces, and they wear out fairly quickly.
Okay, good stuff. Now I got another question from John Clark here. So actually, just to recap that, so what I'm saying there is that OKA's kind of designed very much as an off-road vehicle, which again you'd kind of take away from the fact it's got single wheels and lockers and tall tyres, whereas the other vehicles are sort of road vehicles with the four-wheel drive capability. This is a proper off-road vehicle from the ground up. That's
correct, yeah. And it drives very much like a car, except for the mass. I mean, you can feel the mass, but very pleasant to drive. It's the driving position is unlike any truck you'll get, and very pleasant to drive on the road, off the road, wherever you are.
Okay, well, let's talk about then, because I'll just put a photo up of the inside of an OKA. What model is this? And talk us through some mod cons there. So I can see it's automatic. I can see the biggest transfer case lever this side of a series Land Rover. And I can see a pretty standard, albeit old school, heating, venting. There's air conditioning there, front and rear. Does it have cruise control?
Yes, it does. It does have cruise control, and these days we're fitting 7-inch screens with all the latest stuff.
Okay.
Where that radio goes. So the 7-inch screen with maps, whatever you need in there, whatever the client requires, we put in there.
Okay. What's that lever just to the right of the OKA logo and to the right of the transmission shifter?
To the right of the OKA logo. Oh, that's the pneumatic handbrake.
Oh, okay, got it. Right. And all right, anything. So, if a car driver was going to step into this, what would I have to get used to, apart from the fact it's forward control?
Nothing much. It's pretty simple to drive. So, this particular model, very easy to drive. It's you push the go pedal and the stop pedal and it stops.
Okay.
It's the braking system in it is a air over hydraulic braking system. So your standard brake boosters have been around for forever. The hydro pneumatic brake boosters that you can get. So they're just standard, and they go down to a ventilated disc and your normal disc caliper, and they stop very well. Okay.
All right, good. So I guess that brings us on to what's the ride like? Because my experience of light trucks is that, look, the ride's so rough, they've got suspension seats. What's it like in the OKA?
So with the OKA, and it's got a long history of this capability, is because of the long leaf springs forward and back, they take up a lot of when you've got a lot of corrugations. If you can get your tyre pressure correct, and you can get your make sure that your shocks are good, then you can cruise over corrugations like you don't feel them. Most other trucks are very hard on corrugations because their suspension's set up that way to be a truck, and because they're not as long as what an OKA is, they don't tend to be as compliant. So there's about a gap of 50 to 75 millimetres between the aeon and the top of the spring pack, and that soaks up all of that energy that the corrugations throw up at you. Right. I've got an anecdote here. I've got an OKA client who bought himself an old OKA, fitted it out, and he did a trans-Australian railway line trip with a good friend who had a canter. And they were driving along the Trans-Australian Railway line, and the canter kept on asking for him to slow down, and he didn't realise he was going too fast. But after a while he said, "What's the problem?" He said, "It's just too rough." So this is a canter with all the mod cons underneath to make it as four-wheel drivey as you possibly can. He had the tyre pressures where he needed them. And they both had dash cams. So they compared dash cam vision after a while. The Oka ended up following the canter because he kept on driving off. And they compared dash cam video, and the video out of the canter was you couldn't see anything because of the vibrations that were coming through. So, yeah.
So that's interesting. Now, why is that? Because fundamentally, they're both vehicles of a similar class there. I have noticed on the Fuso canter, on the rear, the shocks are very much inboard. There's a really big moment between where the shock is and again, because it's got the dual axles there. Why do you think the Oka rides better from an engineering perspective?
It's basically the leaf springs.
Okay.
The leaf springs are so long that from point to point, when you're driving over corrugations, for instance, or rough ground, like I said, there's about 50 to 75 millimetres of movement between the Aeon, which is the bump stop, and the top of the spring pack.
Okay.
And whilst you're driving along, that's just quietly bumping up and down.
Okay.
Whereas with a shorter spring, you'll get more feel through the vehicle, as it were.
All right, good. Now we're banked up a bit on questions, so we're going to take one from Aussie 4-Wheel Drive, who says, "What is the safety like?"
So it's out of the class of your 5-star safety rating with, say, for instance, a Ranger or a Ute. Because it's a truck, it doesn't require airbags or the like, although the Isuzus in those trucks are starting to use airbags. The vehicle mass itself, well, in an accident, like any truck, it has a lot more mass. So therefore, unless you're driving into a train, it's pretty safe. As I said, it's got a ROPS cab, so it's got full rollover protection, and it's got just a normal seatbelt system inside.
Okay.
So it's as safe as any other truck on the market.
All right, cool. All right, now the next question is from John Clark, and he says, "What are the differences between the NT, the R series, and the RS?" So can you give us a quick rundown, chronological order of the NT, the R, and the RS?
So the first model was the XT.
Okay.
The XT followed on with the LT.
Mm-hmm.
And then Oka produced the NT, which went through Euro 3, Euro 4 and Euro 5. They built 16 vehicles over about 12 years. So there was an evolution happening there. The main difference is the electronic engine and the electronic transmission. So there's that. I mean, there are big differences between what the Perkins was and what the Spicer transmission was. The transfer case is purpose built, and the diffs are purpose built in this case. So that is the NT series. That's something we're continuing with. So the R series is a remanufactured truck. So if you've got an older truck, whether it's an XT or an LT, we can remanufacture it. So when I say remanufacture, I mean pull it down completely right down to the chassis and start again with all of the original frames and components. So the cab frame, for instance, will be stripped down. All the modifications done to bring it up to a higher standard are done. And as a baseline, we put a mechanical engine in which is a 6 BT Cummins, a 6-cylinder engine.
Okay.
So that truck, not a huge amount of difference between a new truck and an R series. There's still a lot of work to do in the R series to get it up to what people want. I have customers who refuse to want to know anything about electronic engines, even though they own cars with electronic engines in them.
I can't imagine that. Can't imagine that.
Yeah, it's just a mystery.
Yeah.
But so there's some people around with an older Oka, for instance, who want their truck to be new again, and they're easily done. It's more like a shed on wheels, because all the components are sheet metal, and they're put on there in a fashion which we do now, which is all the bonding, so they don't rust and they last for years and years and years.
Okay, good stuff. And you've kind of answered the next question, which is what is involved in remanufacturing an older Oka? I guess the answer to that is whatever it takes to get it back up to a new spec, upgrading, replacing, whatever else.
I do have people come in and say, look, I've got a bit of rust here and a bit of rust there. You could leave that panel on and just fix the rust. Well, it only takes 15 minutes to take the panel off, and it's about, for a quarter panel on the side of the truck, it's only $75. So put a new one on, and you've treated the rust, you've fixed the problem, and generally the cab frame is quite robust. So there's not a lot that we can't replace. But the older trucks, generally speaking, if you're going to do it, you don't really want to put the Perkins back in, because it's a huge backward step.
I think I'd want a 6-speed auto with 700 Newton meters of torque. Thank you very much. Never met a Newton meter I didn't like.
Yeah. No, that makes it work.
Yeah. All right. So a couple of other questions. I guess no ABS.
So ABS is coming in. We're developing that at the moment. The system that we currently have is a spring-loaded device to the back of the vehicle, with same as what a Holden 1-ton ute had on it.
Yep.
So that was through the first 3 models, and we're gonna change that. We're also looking at a completely new braking system, designed and built by a company in Perth here. They've been around for a while, so they do a hydraulic brake drum for rubbish trucks and concrete trucks. They're also trialling a handbrake system on the Hawkeye protected mobility vehicle, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
So we're talking to those guys at the moment about that. That will include a counter system for ABS, and that's what's gonna go in.
Wow, there sounds like there's going to be a lot of stuff happening with Oka. Pretty bright future there.
Yeah, well, I've got a client at the moment, so we're trying to lighten the driveline up and get some driveline angles better than what they are. Not that they're bad now. So we're looking at a NV273 transfer case. It's like Dodge using their trucks, with the Allison married, and the option of a 6.7 Cummins. So at the moment I've got a 5.9 Cummins, which is an electronic engine, and we're trialling it in an NT Oka. So we've got a cooling package, we've got the 2500 series transmission, and we're just about to start putting that together so that we can fit it to his truck and he can run away and do some trials for us.
Oh, fantastic. All right, now next question from Tom. He says, I've been looking at getting an Oka for a while now, and Tom, it'd be good if you could just let us know why you're looking at an Oka. It'd be interesting to know that thought process. Is there anywhere or any chance of being able to test drive one on or off-road before purchasing one?
Depends on where you are. So if, Tom, if you are in Western Australia, you can come and see me, or we can fit you up with someone if you're in, for instance, Victoria.
He's in Western Australia, actually, just answer.
Oh, is he? Yeah. Well, there you go. Come and see me.
There you go.
That's the best thing I can say. I can show you everything.
Yeah. All right, there you go. Show everything, and the truck as well. All right, good. Now Christopher Lennon says, is there any, I'm going to translate this, I think it's, is there any retardation engine, what are the brakes on it, I guess? And that's also a question on Facebook as well. What are the brakes? Is there engine braking, discs, drums, or what?
Discs all round. Like I said, they are air over hydraulic. So you've got an air system, dedicated air system with redundancies built in. You've also got a pneumatic park brake, which is a brake drum on the back of the transmission. And you also have the option of a exhaust brake.
Oh, okay.
So as long as Cummins know about that, the engine supply I think they've got stronger exhaust valve springs in the head. So the exhaust brake can be fitted. That's pneumatically operated as well, and they go quite well as well. If you want one of those, we can bung one in.
And it can tow up to 4.5 tons, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Do you do that on a
Correct.
pintle or a 70mm hitch?
It's on a pintle, so the whole vehicle can. It's all adjustable up and down, so you can lower it down for a trailer of a reasonable height. So the 4.5 ton is a brake load. And it does it quite well with the power that it's got.
Oh, fantastic. All right, now we're going to come towards the end of the webinar here. So if anybody's got any questions, type them on the Facebook live or in the Zoom, and we'll answer those as well. I'll finish off with a couple more questions here. What are we looking at for cost? Let's say I just wanted to walk in and say, okay, give me a brand new NT series dual cab because I'm going to take my family around, and just give it to me as a cab chassis. Then I'm going to go and get a body put on it. What am I looking at for that?
So including GST, about $170,000.
Okay.
So if you're looking at doing that to a canter, for instance, your start point is lower, but you finish, around the 140, 150 mark with a canter, even 160 mark, depending what you put on it. But you've still got a truck, and taking a truck out is unless you've driven an OKA, I won't say it's inferior because they've all got their purpose. If people want to drive along the road and go occasionally off-road, then that's the kind of vehicle they should choose. But if you really want to go out and do stuff that is way out there, then you're not going to achieve it with one of those trucks.
Yeah, I think the canters might be a bit lower than that, but first by the time the mods, but I totally take your point on that as well. Okay, so what? Okay, so Tom's saying responses to why he would get an OKA. I currently have an LC76, spent a small fortune on it, and can still spend another fortune. Well, people do spend money on LC76s, and especially the 9s. For the price of what I'm seeing from an OKA, you get more for your money and a far more capable money than the price of a new LC70 kitted out and a camper trailer for the family. Actually, that's a good point, because when thanks Tom, when you consider this, you kind of got to consider it as a job lot. So let's say that you're going to buy a 200 series, modify that and kit that out, and then have a caravan and then tow that. So that's probably
$250,000.
Yeah, probably $200,000 there. Or you could just go for that. Now you would have to fit a body on the back. So do you guys build your own bodies and campers, or does someone else fit them or do that?
So we have a standard bus module, and the standard bus module goes for a van, goes for a camper. So what we do with those is, and what we're doing indeed with the 6-wheel drive, is we've got a standard module, bus module, and we're fitting it out as a camper, pop top roof, etc., etc. So the same access point, and the fit out is whatever you want it to be. So we have some standard fit out ideas to put in front of people, but a lot of the time people want to change that here and change that there, which is entirely possible, but all in the same body. Or You know, some people do like a slide on. They'll have a utility single cab, and they'll want to do a slide on camper so they can use the truck for something else along the way. A few rural people I know want to do that, so that's what's happening. Yeah.
Okay. All right, fantastic. So before we close up, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience so far about OKA vehicles, what they are, where you're going to go in the future, and any message you want to put out to the readers?
I toured the factory in 1992, and it was, you know, in the 80s I was doing tours in Land Cruisers. So I was taking people out doing tours around the place, and what I found was the vehicles were capable enough, but they just couldn't carry anything. So what you've got with an OKA is this amazing capability, not standard capability, but amazing capability. But you can take what you need and go where you want. And that today, you know, if that wasn't true today as what it was in 1992, then I wouldn't be sitting here believing it. Because it is what it is. The truck is built like it is. There's not that many manufacturers who would want to try and match it because of the costs in doing it. But because these are handmade and it's a niche market, we're able to build something that is that next step along the path of being able to go really off-road.
Yeah, so, and in fact, they're Australian-made, aren't they? Australian designed, built, made all the way through.
That's correct.
And
so supporting local. The only things that we don't get here is most of the components in the driveline, engine, transmission, transfer case. We're getting the diff components built in Melbourne, and so all of the rest is all designed and Australian made.
Okay. All right. And last question from Brad Webb. Why would someone buy an OKA vice versus a Unimog? Well, to me, the Unimog's a much bigger vehicle, probably too wide for the average track. But what's your view?
Well, I've driven Unimog. I was in the army with Unimog. So we were operating in the Lansing training area most of the time, where there were four-wheel drive tracks, and like you say, they're wide and very capable vehicle. So if you want to drive at 80 kilometres an hour to get somewhere, and then find you've got a track. In fact, I did the Amberdell Highway in my truck, and I remember how narrow the track was with the OKA, and it got through without. It's got a lot of scratches on it, but it got through quite easily. But I stopped and found this guy camped on the track basically, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, we've been waiting here 2 days for a mate who's coming along with his Unimog." So I could imagine he'd be doing walking pace, just bulldozing trees the entire distance, which wouldn't have been helpful. Also, you get wind erosion on tracks.
Yeah.
They're difficult to get down a standard track in Australia, and the OKA was actually built for that.
Okay. All right, great. Well, look, that's coming up to the hour point, so I think we'll cut it there. Thanks, everyone, for watching. And I'll be writing about this on motofomo.com.au, and there's a whole interesting history around OKA in the future, so keep an eye. Follow me on Facebook, also on YouTube, and check out what I'm writing on motofomo.com.au. Thanks very much, Dean, for coming in and talking to us, and thank you, everyone, for watching and listening and participating. And see you on the next webinar, which is going to be about an electric conversion of a Range Rover on Wednesday. Thanks all, and thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Robert.